there's this tree. And what's wild is that so many of us are living from this tree, and we don't even realize it's there. See, this isn't some tree of life for growth. No, it's a tree of survival. All right, so let's dive in. Today, we're going to unpack this really powerful metaphor for understanding ourselves, and it's called the survival tree. It's this incredible concept that helps us see the unseen roots that can quietly, and I mean quietly, shape our entire lives. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What even is this tree? Well, before we get into any of the details, the absolute first thing you need to know is this. It was created to protect you. Basically, the survival tree is like, it's a protective identity. It's this whole set of beliefs and behaviors we pick up from our past experiences. And its original job, its only mission, was to keep us safe during one specific time in our lives. Usually when we were kids and really vulnerable. And this right here, this is the heart of the whole thing, right? The tree was your shield, it was your armor, but here's the catch. The exact same thing that protects you in one season of life, well, if you never look at it, it can end up quietly running the whole show, shaping your entire life without you even knowing why. So you're probably wondering, okay, where does a tree like this even start? Let's dig into its origin story. It all begins with something called the living ground and the roots that grow there. Every story has a beginning, right? For this tree, it all starts in what's called the living ground. Think of this as the soil you were planted in. It's the family, the culture, the financial situation, all the conditions you were born into. The key here is that you didn't choose them, but this is the soil where everything starts to grow. So check this out. This is a perfect example of how a root gets made. Let's say you've got parents who absolutely love their kid, but they're just exhausted. They're totally overwhelmed just trying to make ends meet. Now, the love is there, for sure, but all that stress creates an emotional distance. And a little kid, they can't make sense of that. They don't think, oh, mom and dad are just stressed. They feel it. And what they feel is, I'm not seen, or I'm all alone. And that feeling, that's what becomes a root. So these roots aren't just abstract ideas. They take on really specific forms. We're talking about things like fear, trauma from tough stuff that happened, patterns we just inherit from our families without even realizing it, and all the conditioning we get from the world around us. This is the deep stuff. It's what anchors the whole tree in place. And this is so, so important to get. This isn't usually intentional. Your parents didn't plant these roots in you on purpose. The thing is, they were also growing from their own roots, from their own survival tree. It's a cycle that just gets passed down, often from a place of love, not malice. All right, so we've got the roots in the ground. Now let's talk about the trunk, the part of the tree everyone sees. This is the protective identity we build. It's all about who we had to become just to survive. And growing from those roots is this fundamental question, and it's one we rarely ask out loud. It's, who do I believe I am because of what I went through, because of what I felt? See, that feeling of being alone or whatever it was, it doesn't just go away. We actually build a whole identity on top of it. I love how this lays it out. On one hand, you have the actual truth. You are worthy of love just by existing, period. But then there's the protective belief that grows from that root of feeling unseen. And that belief sounds something like, I have to earn love. I have to be perfect. I have to achieve things. I have to be a certain way to be accepted. And let's just make this crystal clear, because it's everything. That protective identity, that's not who you really are. It's a construct. It's the role you had to play, the armor you had to put on just to get through what you were feeling and survive your environment. Okay, so we have a roots and a trunk. Next up, the branches. This is all about how that internal identity, that who I am, actually shows up in the real world. These are our survival behaviors. So the branches are how that protective identity acts. What does it look like? Well, it might look like getting super defensive to avoid being hurt. Or maybe it's trying to control every little thing so you can feel safe. For some people, it's constantly needing validation from others, kind of hoping that if they think you're okay, you'll finally feel okay yourself. And this right here, this might be one of the biggest takeaways of this whole idea. We look at these behaviors in ourselves or in other people, and we label them as flaws. He's so controlling, she's so defensive. But they're not flaws. They are protection strategies that are probably just outdated. They're simply the branches that had to grow from a trunk built on roots of fear. Now, every tree, if you let it grow long enough, eventually bears fruit. But if this tree grows without any awareness, well, the fruit it produces represents the long-term consequences. We're talking about the cycles of pain. So what does this fruit actually look like in our lives? It can show up as a really distorted idea of what love is supposed to be, or a deep feeling of disconnection from others and even from yourself. A lack of trust becomes a huge thing, and you might find yourself in these repeating cycles of painful or even toxic relationships. In the end, the tree can only produce fruit that comes from its own roots. Think about that kid from our example earlier. They grow up, now they're a parent, and they might work their tail off, they might love their kids to death, but they struggle to show that love in a way they never really got themselves. And that's how the cycle continues. It's almost never from hatred or a lack of love. It's from unhealed survival. It's just what they know. Okay, I know this can all feel a little heavy, but this is where the hope comes in. This is where the story pivots. Because now we get to talk about the first, and honestly the most important step to changing any of it, the incredible power of awareness. At the end of the day, this whole model isn't about blame. It's not about pointing fingers at our parents or our past, because that doesn't really help anything. This is a story about awareness, because this second you can actually see the tree. When you can identify its roots, its trunk, its branches, you stop being an unconscious part of it. You get some distance. And seeing it, that gives you power. It lets you step back from the patterns and start asking totally new questions. So really the big takeaway here is this. Now that you can see this tree, now that you have this framework, what's the first thing you're going to start to question? Because that's where the real change begins.